this. All right. So our next assignment is going to be our Parallax Assignment. So I'm going to show what this is inside of After Effects first, just so we get an idea about where we're going with this, so that you have an indication. New composition. That's all fine for now. So I'm just going to create some solids. I'm going to make them 3D. There we go. And then I'm just going to push them back to different levels. Okay, and let me give them different colors so we can see this better. Oops, I really want that one to come down a lot further. And there. All right, so first, all of these are the exact same size. I didn't change physically the dimensions on any of these. All I did was push it back further in the Z direction, okay? So obviously, this causes an issue when we get to that way back one because it looks smaller, right? So we have to be aware of this because when we're inside Illustrator and we're drawing this stuff, we have to know that back one is going to be further away, so we have to draw it extra big, okay? So we have to be aware of that as we're drawing our stuff to keep these dimensions and size. The stuff that's very close to our screen, we can be a bit smaller on because it can just fit right there. The stuff that's going to be really far back, we're going to have to draw it a bit bigger. Sometimes we'll draw things in After Effects, sometimes we'll draw things in Illustrator, sometimes we'll use like gradients and whatever else, okay? So now this has at least depth to it. We haven't seen any parallax going on. All we've seen is depth. I'm going to adjust their positions again. So I'm just going to scoot them upwards like so. And then I'm going to go to their scales and scale them just in the X direction. Okay, so now they're all on top of each other, right? Okay, so I'm going to create a camera. We will use one node for everything we're doing right now. I'm going to turn off depth of field. I don't want that. And there we go. Okay. So now the camera, this is what's going to create the parallax. This is the main point of this assignment. Not the only point, but the main one. As we move, you can see that we're moving this in parallax. The stuff that's further away moves different than the stuff that's closer, giving us the appearance of some sort of depth. Okay? So we have to be aware of this. And we're actually not going to just move left and right. You could, but we're actually going to move into the scene. Okay? So as we go here, I can take the Z direction and actually go into the scene or pull out of the scene. Thank you. Now, this also causes an issue because what happens is once I get past this first red one and the second red one, now we have this like blank space, okay? So something else we have to be aware of is we're not just creating layers that are going to line up perfectly with each other. They have to have some overlap. So that as we get past one layer, the next layer is not just nothing. The next layer feels like something is there, okay? Now this might mean creating a ground, creating a sky, creating a whatever to cover up all those things, okay? So let me go to one of these other layers here like this one. I'm just going to duplicate it. Let me pull my camera back out of here. All right, so I duplicated this one. I'm going to rotate it in the green direction, 90 degrees. Nope, that's not the right one. There we go. And then I'm going to move this down. And then I'm going to scale this up huge. There we go. And then I'm also going to put on a checkerboard, just so we can now see that as I then move the camera, now it feels like we have some sort of surface kind of holding all of this together. It makes a bit more sense than, you know, a second ago. Because I scaled it up, right? Oh, okay. So as we look at that item here, it started off this big, and I scaled it up enormous so that I could see it in my scene. So it's going to be blurry like that. The way that I would fix it is I would go to my solid settings, and I would need to crank this up. Now, there's no magic number. It's just literally crank it up, and then hit OK, or new, and then see where we're at. Okay, maybe I need a little bit more, so I'll go back to this, back to solid settings, add a bit more to this. I wasn't playing with both of them apparently, so I'll just make both of these huge. And then I'll also go into my checkers here and maybe make these, well, they're still like crazy small. Yeah, this has to be huge. I must have scaled it up, yeah, 6,000, so that's just, that's enormous. So let's go even bigger. There we go. So now we're getting more crisper checkerboards, okay? Now that means a lot for our art, because if I was to create a piece of artwork that was for the ground and I scaled it up, same thing. It would be blurry and we'd need to crispen it somehow. Okay, so that's the idea with the initial part of this, getting this parallax. The second part of this is doing rigging. So I want to be able to control our character from another composition. So very similar to what we did with the hologram, but the hologram was more like this animation is just going to do this, and I'm going to drop it into that. I didn't want to control it after the fact. If I did, I'd just jump back into that composition, tweak it, and then come back into this. Okay, so let me open up my Angry Bird here. Last assignment's 1900. Angry Bird. That one. Yes. Yes, sir.
Oh wait, so we make the character in the background in After Effects?
No, we're going to make them in Illustrator. I'm just going over the concepts now, and then we'll get into that.
I did the background in Illustrator.
Right, that's fine.
I was like, oh, wait, do I have to redo it in After Effects?
All right, so here is this angry Spartan. And if I go into his composition, there it is. I'm going to turn this down to third. Motion blur is off. Okay, so here is my controller. So all of the Angry Bird, the Angry Spartan character is all right here inside of that composition. Okay, the end goal of this is you should have one composition, that's my character, and then you have a controller, that's what's going to control the character. So if I go into this, I can see here's all the layers and here's him moving. But if I jump back to this area and I go to my controller and I go to my effects, these are all the different controls I've created to be able to manipulate all of those things in the other composition. So I'm going to go back to full so I can see this better. And let's say that I wanted to control his right pupil. I can just go here and move his right pupil. And grab this one and control his other pupil. If I need to adjust his shield placement, I can move his shield. I can adjust where his sphere is pointing. His spear is pointing. Oh, that's the position. There's a rotation. How are they connected? Yeah. So this is using a combination of expressions and pick whipping. Okay, so we'll get into the specifics of it, but that's essentially what it's doing. This composition has rotations, positions, scales, everything that I want to do. The other composition has all the controls. So all I'm doing is saying, when I grab this thing here, I want you to control this thing. When I do this one, grab this one. When I do this one, grab that one. It's pretty simple once you have it set up. The hardest thing is, conceptually, working between these two different comps to make sure it works correctly. Because look at all the layers that I currently have in this scene. Imagine if I also had all the stuff from my Angry Bird in there, that would be like a crazy amount of stuff going on, okay? So this makes it a lot easier. Oops. Now if I hit play in here, ignore the blackness there, it's missing the texture. So stretch it out, that's scale, right? Yep, but we have to be very aware of how we're scaling it, because with him, I don't want to scale the shield up. I don't want to scale the spear up. I only want to scale his body, and in this case, his helmet. So I have to be very aware of what items I'm scaling and making sure I'm only linking those one items to a squish and squash or stretch and squash controller. Okay. Now look at the background too. You can see that parallax happening. Right? So the stuff that he's landing on is moving different than the stuff that's in the middle ground. It's moving different than the stuff that's in the far ground. Okay? So you can do it this way, where you go left to right. That's fine. We're getting parallax. We're moving in 3D. We're doing the controls. Or you can have the character press in. Either one is acceptable. You can even have it do a little bit of both. It moves over and moves in. You can do that too. Okay? I'm more concerned that you know the controlling a character, rigging it, setting it up, getting it ready to go, and that you also know how to do the background and make sure you have all this parallax. Okay? So now how we create all this stuff, where it starts, is in Illustrator. So we're going to start off with a 2560 by 1440. Again, we go bigger because if we need to make it a little bit bigger, we're fine. If we need to shrink it down, that's not an issue. So I went to double the size. And I let it think. There we go. Hit OK, yes. Oops. And then I just remembered that my hotkey for turning that smart guides off is something tied to my recording software, so I have to remember right here, high transparency grid. There it is. Okay, so we need to create the background elements and we need to create the character. Those are two separate files. Now, a switch on this assignment is, I mentioned last week, you should have 5 different designs, 5 different characters you created, 5 different matching backgrounds for those characters, right? So you should have 10 different drawings. You're going to pair up with someone. You're going to collaborate between your designs and their designs and pick which one or a combination of them that you like. One person will design the background, one person will design the character. And then when we go into After Effects, you're going to switch. Whoever's designing did the background will rig the character. Whoever designed the character will rig the background. Okay? This is more like a team collaborative type thing that you would get out in the industry. Okay? Apart from all the other junk I showed in my tabs, that's just hardware and software. This is where the skills are. This is the kind of stuff that you need to be doing out there in the world. This will also get you ready for the Advanced After Effects class, the compositing class, where they're doing more and more teamwork. So when you design your backgrounds, it's going to be basically going through and drawing out the different elements of it. So for, let's say I wanted a mountain scene, so I would just go into Illustrator and draw out some sort of mountain scene. I'm not going to spend too much time going through the specifics of this. Notice that I did go past my work area, so I didn't stop right at the edges. That's fine because when I get into After Effects, that's going to adjust the position of that one. Okay, so as I push it back further, it will make it smaller. So that's fine. I'm going to leave it bigger than I need to. I'm going to give this a color. And then let's say that I wanted to have frosted tops on here, like snowy. I'm going to make a bigger brush. And I'm just going to draw in some stuff here. There we go. And like that. Okay, so now I can just take all of this, use my Shift M, and then just click each one of those. And all that's doing is just separating it so that I can then grab the top of this and then just delete these. Now it looks like the tops are gone. They're not. They're just white. So then I'm going to grab these. Come on. You're so close. Whoop. There we go. I hit something. I hit F. All right, so that, and then I will just color this. I'm going to color this like kind of like a gray for now, just so I can see it. Okay. So now I can see that obviously the mountains have tops. I don't want the, I don't want a stroke on the bottom of this. I'll get rid of that. All right, so there's my mountains. That's stuff that's way in the distance. I may want a variety of these, thinking of something where I have a mountain range, and I want to see the layers of these mountains kind of moving as I move in parallax. I can group these together. There's nothing wrong with that. I could even scale these down some, and then just duplicate it. And now I have more of a mountain range. And as long as I don't see a repetitive pattern, I'm good. If I do, not a huge deal. I can just grab some points and then just, not round them. And then just push some stuff down and just give it more of a uniqueness to it. There we go. Okay, so that would be my background layer. So I'd come over here, I would label this background. As we're working in a 2-person team, labeling stuff is obviously going to be key because we don't want to pass it off and say layer 1 through 800. That's not going to help them. You have to have it organized, okay? So next new layer, I can lock the background because I don't need that. Then I'm going to do a middle ground. So let's say I'm going to do something like hilly. I'll go in with my brush, and I'll just do like some hills. And then I'm closing it off again, and then giving it a color. Beautiful. Okay, so those are my hills. Now I may have this layer, which is hills, the mountain layer, which is mountains. And then I also might have little ones that I'd use on top to make it feel, again, more like there's depth to it. The more layers you have that you can create this illusion of depth, the better feel you will have for this kind of thing. Versus I have a background, foreground, middle ground, and it just feels very staticky and kind of boring still. So I still might come in here with my ellipse tool, and then let's push that up. There we go. And just so I have a little bit of a difference in color for now, I can just darken this. Now ideally, after the fact, I would come back in and I would add more of these. Now if this is going to be the same shape, 4 different shapes, they're exactly the same, I don't need all 4 shapes. All I need is one, because when I get in After Effects, I can set that one up, duplicate it, and then move it to where I need it to be moved. Even if it's going to be a different height, that's fine. Even the mountain range back here, I could have created like 2 or 3 different mountains and then just duplicated them and kind of randomly positioned them to get them to look like a mountain range. So there's my hill. That's good. Make a new layer. Drop that on there. And call this individual hill. Everything that will be moved separately is all in their own layer. Just like our hologram, anything that is kind of part of that same thing, they need to be separated on different layers if they're going to move separately. If they're moving together, they can all be on that same layer, okay? So your environment will be very much like this. You obviously want to consider a platform, how your character is moving. This type of setup is more for something that is going to be going horizontally. My character is moving from the left side of the screen to the right. You can go right to left, but it just seems backwards. So go left to right. It has to have something that they would be landing on. So if these hills are way in the back, then I would need to have some sort of flat land or something here that he would be, landing on, doing whatever. In the this one here, if I go to Pantheon bounce platform, there we go. I don't know why that's still not showing. Oh, because of this. There we go. So if I isolate this bounce platform, it's actually just this like plane. Come on. Does it want to go into the layer? That's fine. Maybe if I check that off and then double click. Nope. All right, I'll just scale it down so you can see it. So that's what his bounce platform looks like. The rest of the look comes from inside of After Effects. I've added texture to it to give it some kind of ground graininess to it. I also have some obstacles. Why is he bouncing, right? So he's bouncing because there's an opening there that he's bouncing around. So he has to bounce over these gaps, bounce over the other gap, and then eventually gets to where he needs to get to. And there's 2 of those bounce platforms. Okay, so same thing here. He has this, but obviously he could have other stuff that would cause him to be some kind of bounciness in his scene. Think of Mario. They created one brick and they duplicated that one brick for all the ground that he walks on. And then he walks to the edge, there's a gap, he jumps over it. Same kind of thing, same concepts here, okay? So if this is his foreground, I would go there, drop this onto a new layer, and say foreground.
So for something like Mario, would that have to be like way larger?
Well, his background is more loop. There's a pattern to it, right? So it's just like a gradient. And then they just have these clouds kind of interspersed throughout. Mm-hmm. Right.
It's lazy, but it's smart at the same time. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if you noticed about the original Pokemon games, but they're basically the game equivalent of, in comedies where they're like packing their suitcase to go on vacation and then they sit on it to try and get everything in? That's the original Pokemon.
That's funny.
And that's why there's so many glitches in the original Pokemon.
So here's some clouds. Again, if I want to move each cloud separately, different layer for each cloud. If I want to move them all together, same layer, right? Typically, it's always safe. Put them on separate layers. Then you can decide later on in After Effects, I want to put them together. No big deal. Comp them, you can move them together. A little bit more tricky to separate them afterwards. And then obviously you don't have to worry about the color too much right now, but obviously we do have to worry about a style. When you're working with someone else, you want your character and you want your environment to kind of match each other. I wouldn't want to do like an anime style background. This is like crazy neon. I just realized this is not neon here, just so we're aware when we see this. No, I don't know why it's so neon. Yeah, this is, ignore the colors up there. But we wouldn't want to have, let's say, even crazy neon colors for our background, and then our character is very subdued, right? So we want to make sure that the colors we're working with our teammate, that we're choosing the right stuff, okay? So that's the background. I would go and develop this further. I would go and save this into my 1900 new folder. Parallax, thank you.
So, when one person does the background, one person does the character, do they send the character to the other person so they can animate it After Effects?
Once they're done. So I'm going to get those before we go into After Effects, and I'm going to make sure that the character is set up right, make sure the backgrounds are set up right. That way we're not like sabotaging the other person. That way I can say, no, you need to fix these items here. Yes, ma'am. No, you have 5 that you've sketched out, okay, 5 characters, 5 backgrounds. You're going to work with your teammate, so you can pick your own teammate. Then you'll decide together which one you want to do or make a new one, right? So you might be like, oh, that's kind of cool. You did Sonic and I did Mario. Maybe we can find this middle ground where Mario and Sonic live together. Or maybe I'm going to do the Sonic background, you're going to do the Mario character and do something like that, right? So you can mix stuff together. There's no problem with that. And then one of you will do the background, one of you will do the character, okay? Now it might seem like, well, the character's obviously going to have a lot more detail. It's not. The character is going to be very simple, okay? They don't have to be complex. They shouldn't be complex. So same line. Sir?
For my character sketches, I just kind of did like I did with like the Angry Birds style with for the 5 different characters I chose.
Right, and then looking at those two, if I'm going sideways, I wouldn't want my character to be facing the screen, right? I'd want them facing the direction they're going. Not fully. We want to do like a 3/4, but we wouldn't go like full on because then they're like scooting sideways.
I was thinking that, so do we draw out different angles of the characters?
Depending on the movement of it.
Okay.
Okay, so if he's just moving this way, then all we need is that 3/4. Okay, if he's moving into the scene or out of the scene, we don't want to see the back of him because then we don't see anything. But at some point we want to see the front of him, and then we could have them turn sideways and do a side view animation and then do the other way. It wouldn't transition, it would just jump to the other direction.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we would do those too. Now here's going into the scene, like if I'm doing something like the Jetsons, I would be able to just create the assets. So looking at this, I'm looking at, okay, I'm going to create a building here, a building here, a building here. I'm going to create some towers, and I'm just going to kind of randomly place these throughout the environment, and then have my camera kind of moving around these items, and then have George come in with his spaceship, and then do a little thing in front of the camera, and then zip off, okay? So that would be the idea with something like this. So all my buildings are just assets. I'm not totally concerned with the background here because the background is going to be just a gradient. I'm going to throw in some clouds too, so I'll make some clouds. I'll use basically these shapes of different colors sporadically throughout my environment. Okay, but you can see a huge difference in the shading here where I have some highlights and I have some more line work than here, right? 2 totally different things. Obviously you and your teammate have to collaborate together to figure out what is going to work for you. And you may not know that right away, and that's fine. You may just kind of draw the stuff and then kind of decide, yes, this is where we want to go. That's fine too, okay? For the character, we're going to do the same thing. So new project, same size. Turn off that stupid background. Yes, sir. I'm going to keep you around, Matt, because every time I lose my brain, then you're there to help me. No, you're good. I'm totally serious. All right, so for the character, think of just the head. So we're not doing a full body. The one I showed last week did have a full body. He spent an extra like 50 hours on his getting it all situated, okay? This one, just think of the head. Think of some other things you may want to include, like on George here, I created his shirt and his hand because if he's inside of his spaceship here, I obviously don't want to have just the head there. That seems kind of weird. So I want to put something else to kind of cut it off. So if it's doing the angry bird, we would do something just like this. So I'm creating a circle. I'm offsetting the circle. I'm using my Shift M to eliminate this. And then I have my neon green, I'm sure, up on the screen. And then I have a little highlight there. And I don't have any lines because that looks weird. There we go. If I do want a line going around it, typically I'm going to duplicate my circle and then paste it and then do just a separate layer for just the line. And that way I just have a bit more control over it. There we go. So I can also go in here and do a little bit of tapering on the line. You'll see these kinds of things just, oh man, that is, that's going to wake you up. Let's go to a different color here. Let's go to... Yeah. Acid today or something, I don't know. All right, that seems better anyway. All right, so adding just that taper of an edge around it definitely feels a little bit more complete than just that solid line, okay? So don't have that solid line, do tapering. Even on my Jetson one here, you'll see how I use that throughout. Every character needs to have at least 3 things animated on it. Your backgrounds will also have some animations going on, but the character will have at least 3 things animated. So typically easy spots to do that are the eyes. So I'm going to do a very similar setup to the Angry Bird there. Just going to delete this one. Or yeah, the different one. And this, make sure this is white. This will be a dark version of this. Excuse me. Yeah. There we go. So there's one eye, and obviously I need to adjust the perspective of this a little bit more. And make this bigger. There's a little bump right there. Oops. Bump right there I want to get rid of. We'll just pretend that that's good. I'm going to cut this in a little bit. I don't want this all. I think that'll be good like that. Oops. There we go. And then a little line right here. Scoot. And the idea with all these is to be adaptable. So you have to know your file inside and out to know, if you change your colors, what layers do you have to grab to change the colors. I'm not going to get into using the global colors or any of that stuff. If you remember how to do that, you can definitely do it. I'm just going to stick to just straight color picking and adjusting. All right, so there's like one eye. So then I can grab all this stuff, duplicate it for the other side. Maybe shrink it down a smidge. And now the items that are going to be animated here are going to be what? Pupils, right? Now, if I go here with the pupils, that seems to make sense. They're together. But if I ever want to do like a cross-eyed, I need to have separate control of each pupil. Okay? And that counts as one. It is. It's always best to have something separate, because if you don't use it, you can just put them together. If you do use it, then you have the ability there. As you label stuff, it's always going to be with the character or with the scene, okay? So this Angry Bird, which side of him is this pupil on? Left. His left, right? So think you're the Angry Bird, that's his left eye. So call this left pupil. Right pupil. And then this is just his skin, so we'll just make sure this is just skin. I'm going to do the beak here. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I'm just going to do a couple items that will be animated, and the rest is pretty much repetitive behavior. There we go. All right, so let's say there's his beak. I think I want to adjust this. Pull this down some. All right, that seems good. I will round this off a smidge here. All right, so there's his beak, but that's just a solid piece. If I want the beak to open and close, I need to have at least 2 pieces. So same kind of idea here. I'm going to just create a shape. Let's see it like that. And I'm using that shape just as my divider. That's all it is. And then I just delete that other piece. So now I have this, which is going to be, let's say, the bottom of the beak. And that would be the top of the beak. Okay. Again, I pick better colors. For right now, it works. I'm going to test it out. So I'm just going to put my pivot over here, go to my rotate, and then rotate it. Okay. And now I can verify that, yes, when I take this into After Effects, I should be able to put a pivot there and should be able to rotate it up and down. Some animations you may want to have is more than just rotation. So something else you could do is you could do different poses for the beak. So instead of me doing like this beak is here, I could actually take these 2 layers. This will be beak closed. And then I'm going to duplicate it and call this one beak open. Let me hide the other one. Oops, rotate, pivot goes here, rotate that down. What was that? Oh, if you just hit the R key for rotate, and then there's the pivot point there, so you don't have to touch this, you just click where you want it to be. Now it's locked over there, just for this time, so it doesn't like keep it there forever. We'll have to reset it when we get in After Effects, but now we can just rotate it. Okay. Now the purpose of this is you may not want the beak to look like that when it opens and closes. You may want a completely different look to it. Think of the Angry Birds show. They didn't have all the characters just doing this. Their mouths actually like kind of deformed, even though it's a hard surface. It like squished a bit. So I may want to take this and just kind of squish this up like this, and squish this like that, and then now that's his opened beak, and that's his closed beak. Now, there wouldn't be a transition in this case because After Effects wouldn't transition between these 2 different shapes. What it would do is I'd be able to switch between them. So think of more like stop motion where you have these characters going from like one locked mouth to a different locked mouth to a different locked mouth. Okay? If you guys have watched Robot Chicken, all of their mouths, right? They're just drawings of different mouths that they just drop on there for each one. Okay? So you can do it for that. You can also do it for the eyes. You may want the eyes open in one scene and closed in another scene. So that might be something else you want to do, is have one layer is eyes open, another layer is eyes closed. And it literally is, what do you want to look like when it's open? What do you want to look like when it's closed? Let's leave his beak on there. So that's 2 things. I can animate the beak. I can animate the pupils. That's 2 different items. Then I have to animate something else. So if he had an item, that might be something I want to animate. It's like my Spartan had a spear and a shield. Those are 2 different items. He may have eyebrows. Those may want to be adjusted too. Okay? Think of how you'd animate them. Do you want them to just be able to move like up and down, Groucho Marx style, or do you want them to be like, you know, compassionate or angry eyebrows, right? Do you want to use different poses for the eyebrows? You can think of all of those different kinds of things. Even the eyes themselves, you could create 15 different eye shapes that are out there. Oops. Oops, I should type expression. Oh, that was right there. That's what I wanted. This one, right? So you could actually draw your character with these different kind of like looking different eyes, different directions, and then just cycle between all these different ones as you create those for your character. Okay. Another one that you could do if you're just doing the straight character here, make a new layer, is you can just do like hair. Hair is like an easy one. It's just kind of like a floppy one. And I'll make this, why don't I have a stroke on there? It's there, it's on the layer, it's stroked. Oh, I guess I didn't turn that up. There we go. Come on. Oh, Shift W, wrong one, that's why. So something like that, something like this. And then I can duplicate it and reflect it. And if you're not familiar with the hotkeys in Illustrator, I do have hotkey sheets over there. But if you hover over any of these, it'll tell you the hotkey right after it. So reflect is obviously O for reflect. There you go. And then obviously we don't want the middle too, and then we'll grab this point. And put it there. And then take that size down on that one. Okay. So now in this one, I have 3 different items. So I would go into 3 different layers, and I would put each one of those. And again, I may not animate them all separately. Most likely I'm going to. But I want to have the ability. So back, feather, or hair, whatever I want to call it. This is front feather, and this is middle feather. Okay, so by the time you're done, you should have an environment all set up like that. You know, more stuff, obviously. And your character all set up, obviously, with more stuff, more layers over here. If you look at the Spartan guy that I have here, you can see I gave him eyebrows. I gave him these kind of like the more angry looking eyes. They're not like big rounded eyes. His beak is separated. He does have a stroke around there. He has his helmet on. He has this gash on his cheek from fighting. And then obviously I can go through, and all of these things I can control. So here's his squashing. Some of the stuff we have to do separately because it just doesn't work. Like I can't squash him and move his eyeballs at the same time. That's a different class. Here's his blinky, so if he wants to wink at someone, he can do that. And then here's his beak opening. In this case, I'm animating both the top and bottom opening. In the real world, I believe birds do open both, but humans don't. Your lower jaw is the only thing that moves. Spear position, spear rotation. Here's his eyebrow rotation. So he's a little more of a compassionate, right? Which one is it? The right one, I think? Yeah. So now he's doing like the rock. Right? So before the end of class today, find one person in the class. I think we had 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 15. We have 15 people, but we're missing Zendria, yeah, and Alan. Okay, so yeah, so before class today, get in a group, 2 people, and then if you can brainstorm, figure out an idea about which ones you want to use, and then create your stuff. By next week, Monday, you should have your character or your background drawn. Okay, so this Wednesday coming up will just be a lab day to, again, work on these, get them completed, and then Monday when we come in, I'll go through the actual, like bringing in the After Effects and starting to animate stuff. Yes, sir?
So we got to have both the character and the background done by next Monday because one of us is working on the character and the other is working on the background.
Correct. Now this should also lend, obviously, to more complete stuff because you have 2 people working on the same assignment that typically you'd be working on background and character, right? Yeah. So it should go a little bit quicker, a little bit more completed. Yes, sir?
We're only working on one assignment?
Correct. You're only working on one assignment.
And we just got to do 5 each, so we'll have 10.
5.
You're gonna have 10 sketches that you've sketched out, okay, 5 and 5, and then together you're gonna pick one, okay? Now when we get to the animation part, you both will be animating stuff, but when we get to the building it all, you're gonna be building your own pieces, okay? Any questions?